Hi guys and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about 8 to 9 Newton meters and is it enough for sim racing and will you be happy with 8 to 9 Newton meters? Let's get into it.
Go, nail it.
So firstly, a bit of a TLDR that I should say that force feedback is a very, very personal thing for everyone. We're all different people. We all have different expectations. And depending on yourself and what games you play, what type of driving that you do, it's very, very subjective. So if you disagree with me and what I say, that's perfectly fine. We can all have our opinion here in the chat. So feel free to shoot down any comments and also your experience and what you feel will be best for if you were buying your first direct drive wheelbase, what cars you drive and what you would recommend. Okay, so that out of the way, 8 to 9 Newton meters. Now, I'm coming in from spending probably 2 to 3 years now with my Moza R9, driving it nearly every single day. I'm really used to it now, and I've gotten enough information to be able to provide some detail about what I think that 8 to 9 Newton meters is good for, where its limitations are, and how it could be beneficial to you. So for the first year and a half of sim racing on my Moza R9, I actually had no idea about clipping and force feedback in games and what the actual limitations are of your wheelbase. And the limitation becomes clipping. And clipping is when your wheelbase can't send through the signal anymore. It's used its maximum amount of torque that it can produce, and you breach that limit and you go to a point where the base can no longer send the signal through, and it's obviously not a strong enough motor to give you the signal that you want, that the game's trying to provide. And there's some talk about that this can be detrimental to your wheelbase when you do breach this limit, that it can do damage to it. So obviously, the higher the limit of your wheelbase, the more punishment it can handle pretty much from us, and the more punishment that it can put through to you. So as you go up higher and higher in strength, it runs through the wheelbase to give you more detail and more strength as well. And you get more flexibility and more headroom, I guess, to be able to use higher powered cars and to make it feel a little bit more immersive, I guess, and maybe more realistic, but we'll talk about that a bit more later on. Now, one of the biggest probably issues that I can see with sim racing right now, and especially force feedback, is that most games don't have any graph or anything to show you that your force feedback is clipping or you're using the maximum power of your wheelbase. And for the first year and a half of me using my Moza R9, I had no idea, because I'd never used it. I had never used a direct drive force feedback wheelbase. I had no idea of its limitations. It felt massively strong enough for me, and I was using it and I was like, the detail is amazing, everything's fantastic here, this is great. But I had no idea if I was clipping, using its maximum force, going over the top, and potentially doing damage to my wheelbase. And I think this is where the problem lies, is that the games don't give you any information about what's happening with your wheelbase. And I think sim manufacturers should give us a graph to show us that, hey, you're using the maximum limit of your wheelbase, or this is where you're at on a graph. So you don't do damage to your wheelbase in the future. You don't overheat your wheelbase. And you can do things to support your wheelbase. So that's one thing that I would really like to see, but I had no idea. So that becomes an issue because I just thought that it could just do anything. I could run it at 100% and turn the force feedback settings up as high as I like, and there'd be no repercussions, because I thought that the manufacturer would limit it to what it can send through to my hands. But that is actually not the case. That is not the case. And how did I figure this out? iRacing came to the rescue, because iRacing actually has a graph that shows you the force feedback strength and where you're at and if you are clipping, because in game you can set your maximum wheelbase strength. You can adjust that as an actual figure, and then it will show you on the graph of how much of that force feedback you are using, which is great because some cars use a lot more force feedback than others, and you can see in the graph is, am I clipping, am I going over? And you can actually set it to automatically detect what the car is doing versus the force feedback of your wheel, and it will adjust it for you, which is sensational, man. I love that. And that's what we need from manufacturers to be able to do that, or gaming developers to be able to do that. And this is probably the biggest reality check for me, is that I realized that when I was in iRacing and I was using particular type of cars like GT3s or high powered open wheel cars, was that my force feedback was clipping almost every corner. And even though I wasn't losing, I didn't feel like I was losing any detail, or it didn't feel like the strength was backing off, that I was losing force feedback, none of that. But I was actually clipping almost the whole time. And I'd probably been doing this for a year and a half on the R9, and the wheelbase never really felt hot, except for ACC when I was running. That's got a really high polling rate, and I felt like the wheelbase was getting a bit warm after about a half an hour race or so. And that's what made me think that, hang on, maybe this game is a bit more strenuous on force feedback than others, and maybe I was clipping. But outside of that, I had no idea. But thank God iRacing has got this graph, because I think that it has saved my wheelbase, and hopefully it can save yours as well, because it starts to give you a baseline of what strength your wheelbase can actually run and what it can't run. You'll get used to it, and then you'll feel that, okay, I think I'm clipping here because I'm over the strength that I would usually get in iRacing. So that's amazing, and we need that feature. And coming back to, is 8 to 9 Newton meters enough? Well, this graph started to make me realize that in some cars, 8 to 9 Newton meters is perfect. You will not need much more than that. You might clip sometimes in extreme situations, but not very often. But in other cars, you have to turn down the force feedback to meet the 8 to 9 Newton meters expectation, and to stop it from clipping at every single corner potentially, because it just can't produce that power or use all that signal in that short space of time. So after using iRacing for a certain amount of time, I've realized that 8 to 9 Newton meters is perfect for performance cars. For performance cars, even for a rally, like in any type of rally game, the majority of the time 8 to 9 Newton meters is fine, because you're not dealing with the massive high speed, high torque turning that you would on a racetrack, right? Little details in that don't really bother 8 to 9 Newton meters as much as heavy turning. So heavy turning seems to be the bigger issue. Accidents can give you big spikes in force feedback, but just general driving, rally, performance cars, lower powered performance cars or race cars or open wheelers are perfectly fine. You wouldn't need any more to get a realistic feeling of what I believe a force feedback setting feels like for those types of cars. You can get away with that and be happy, and you'll be perfectly fine. Now, the thing that you kind of run into, the issue, is when you get into GT3 to a degree, and high-powered open-wheel cars, LMP2 cars, when you start to get to really high-powered, high G-force cars, is when you start to realize that you're kind of reaching the limit of what the 8 to 9 Newton meters can put out. Now, I've never driven a GT3 car or a high-powered open-wheel car or an LMP car, but after looking at the iRacing graph, and when you can see and you can feel that you are clipping and you're going way over, because you need to put a larger amount of force on the steering wheel to get around corners, and you can see that it just goes straight into clipping, and that you do need to drop the settings down to be able to not clip and not go over your wheelbase's power limit. And you find that it's more in the mid corners. You're not too bad. It's just more when you're going slower and you're getting around tight corners, you're perfectly fine. But it's in the high powered, high speed, quick corners that you're reefing on, trying to get around. You'll just see the settings go. They just go straight to clipping. And also, if you hit ripple strips and you're also turning mid-speed corners or high-speed corners, to get the realistic feeling in your hands of being in a high-powered GT3 car or an F1 car, whatever it may be, LMP, you do feel like that you could use a little bit more strength just for realism. Just for the realism point of view. It's easily drivable. Don't get me wrong. 8 to 9 Newton meters is perfect. It may just not feel as realistic as it probably could when you get in these heavier, high-powered cars or the lightweight, high-powered, super high-powered cars. So this is where, if you're going to be getting into GT3s and you want the most realistic, immersive performance and really feel like the weight of the car you're throwing around, that you've got extreme detail on the track, all of this all at once, this is where I would recommend going over 8 to 9 Newton meters, either looking at 12 to 16 to 18 to 21 Newton meters. You'll be perfectly fine. 12 seems to be the sweet spot for most people to get the full range. And if that 12's good, 12's good. If I was starting and I was just on a basic setup, like the R9 and the R9's perfectly fine for me. 8 Newton meters is perfectly fine. I don't feel like I need to upgrade, to be honest. I can still drive around happily in GT3s and F1 cars. It doesn't have to be off the chain, super ridiculously immersive. And to be honest, sometimes the heavier you go, the more it feels like the car is driving you, not you driving the car. So with that said, 12 Newton meters could be the sweet spot. Could be. 8 to 9 Newton meters if you're maybe not strong enough and maybe you just don't want that huge amount of detail, potentially ripping your hands or hurting yourself with the wheelbase. You can turn them down, of course. But yeah, anything above that, great. Enjoy that extra bit of immersion, but it's definitely drivable with 8 to 9 Newton meters. I mean, I've used more powerful wheelbases than the R9. I've used the SimMagic Alpha Mini. I've used the Fanatec DD1, the SimMagic Alpha, and the SimMagic Alpha Ultimate. Yes, there is a difference, for sure. And yes, if you want that ultra realism, I would go to, something like the SimMagic Alpha or the SimMagic Alpha Ultimate or the Moza R16 or the R21, even though I haven't used those. But just the extra power would be quite beneficial. Would I feel like I need to go higher than my R9? For me personally, maybe, but not right now. Like I don't feel like I need to do that. I'm perfectly happy with the R9. I'm going to be using it for a very long time. It's been 3 years already. And now that I realize that I am missing out on something, I might have a look at it. I think that's what sim races is what we do. After doing quite extensive testing on all different types of cars and the type of forward feedback and the clipping that you get from 9 Newton meters, it really comes down to what you want as a racer and what type of cars you want to drive, what kind of events you want to get into, whether it's rally, whether it's performance car driving, whether it's F1, whether it's GT3, whatever it may be. It depends on what you want to do as to what you should go for. There's no right or wrong. It's totally up to you and what you want to do. But I think that you will be happy with 8 to 9 Newton meters. I really do enjoy it. So that's all that matters. As long as you enjoy it, end of the day, it's your money. Spend it how you wish. But yeah, 3 years in, I'm still happy with 8 to 9 Newton meters. But I do understand there's a little bit more there if you do want to go for extra. So it's more longevity in terms of your experience. So I hope this video was beneficial for you. I hope you guys enjoy it, and shoot down in the comments if you feel that what's the perfect sweet spot for you guys for sim racing. If you've tried all the wheelbases in the world, what's the one that you recommend the most, and probably the most cost-effective one would be great. Because for me, I'm a bit more about cost effectiveness. I'm not so much about spending millions of dollars if you don't have to. But yeah, all depends on what you want to do, what games you play, and I think we can all help each other sort of make the right decisions through YouTube and social media to try and give people the best advice that we can to help them moving forward and make the right decisions to buy the best wheelbase for them. So I hope you guys found this video interesting. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. Subscribe and like it if you wish. And I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.
Car left. Clear left. On your clear right. Right side. Right side's clear. E14 to left side. You're still there. 3 wide, you're on the right. Car left, clear left.